Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. I saw an interesting story with North Carolina. And to me, I do think it's an interesting story on kind of the state of college athletics in general. And it's just an interesting story because of what college athletics is going to look like and the future of college athletics as we get deeper into this rev share era. Okay. So I know it's a little nerdy, right? But we all know every school gets $20.5 million to spend on their athletes. That's the rule right now. The money is going to go up here in the next couple years, but right now it's at $20.5 million. I bring it up because every school is allowed to spend the $20.5 million how they want. Okay. Listen, I don't know this, but UConn, right? Huge women's basketball program. South Carolina, maybe the same, that you can spend 10%, 20% on women's basketball. I don't know if anybody will, but you can. Arkansas, Tennessee, you got a great baseball program. You can spend money on that. So I bring it up because there are no rules, but it seemed like the guideline that was coming down from the NCAA was you spend 75% on football, 15% on men's basketball, and then you sprinkle a little bit everywhere else, okay? But where it becomes interesting is, like I said, there are no rules, and I think with this rev share, when you can get somebody publicly to talk about where they're spending money, it kind of tells you where the athletic department aligns, okay? We did the story a few weeks ago. Matt Norlander, CBS Sports, reported that Kentucky basketball was spending up to 45% of its rev share on men's basketball. Now, UK came out and said that wasn't true. I tend to believe Norlander, another conversation for another day. But Kentucky clearly is prioritizing basketball. Well, an interesting story did come out this week where North Carolina's AD actually went on the record and said exactly how he plans on spending his rev share. This is interesting in the way that it is going to be divvied up. Bubba Cunningham, okay, he is the AD at North Carolina. You may remember him because he was the tournament chair. We'll save that conversation for another day. But here's what he said. He said, this was on the Inside Carolina podcast. He said the settlement itself from the House is 75, 15%, 5-5. 75% for football, 15% for men's basketball, 5% for women's basketball, 5% to everybody else. He said that is one way to do it, and a lot of schools are going to do it that way. When I looked at how we generate commercial activity, that's not the way ours is being broken down. Ours is broken down 65% to football, 35% to men's basketball. I know that's 100% right there. So we don't go over 100%, but that's roughly where it is. And then baseball next, women's basketball fourth. So in other words, virtually all of the money is going to go to football or men's basketball. Sorry, women's sports. Don't know how that works with Title IX. I'll leave that to the lawyers. Sorry, UNC baseball, which is obviously very good, but they are not going to get as much as other people are. Why it's interesting, though. I think it's very interesting because actually, to me, I think it speaks to the health of North Carolina football under Bill Belichick. And I think it proves that North Carolina, as we're going into a make or break year for Hubert Davis, whatever the situation is, North Carolina is not going to take a backseat in basketball on the national stage. And I think it's actually a very interesting conversation, okay? First of all, I kind of just like the transparency of it. He's just basically like, look, here's the deal. The exact quote he said was, when I looked at it, how we generate commercial activity, that's not the way ours is broken down. In other words, he was like, well, here's the deal. Football and men's basketball make about 100% of our revenue, so they're getting 100% of the payment. I have no problem with it. Again, I get that, it's different at every school and Title IX stuff, this and that, but I have no problem with it. But what I think is interesting is, first of all, he kind of acknowledges like football is a big deal here, but it's not quite what it is at other places. But I also think the 65% to me, as weird as it sounds, I think it speaks to the fact that he's very confident with where they are with Bill Belichick. Now, remember, Bill Belichick, what was the big story with Belichick when he took the job besides his girlfriend? The big story is that he has a buyout effective as of June 1st, 2025, I guess it would have been, that basically said that if he wanted to leave for any job, including the NFL, he could do it with no buyout. And so to me, I think that if you are going to give Bill Belichick a little bit less money than most other football coaches are going to have, You have to be confident that he's happy there and that he plans on being there for the long term. Now, the good news is if you are a UNC fan, I don't think he's going anywhere. I think the NFL has kind of passed him by, just like I think the NFL has kind of passed John Gruden by. And so I think he's staying in college football. I think he's planting his roots. I'll say this too. I don't know how many people follow this. North Carolina actually has a pretty good recruiting class right now. So they did well in the portal this offseason. But right now they have like the 16th, 17th ranked recruiting class in the country for 2026. So this notion that Bill Belichick wasn't going to be able to recruit, it's just not true. Number 4 class in the ACC behind only Miami, Florida State, and Clemson, who, no disrespect, Carolina fans, but I think that's probably who you expect to be behind. So there is that element of it. Oh, by the way, when he does leave, Steve Belichick, his son, will be ready to take over. Remember, by the way, whatever you think of the Belichick family, Steve had one of the elite defenses in college football last year at Washington. Now, from the basketball side, I actually think it's pretty interesting as well, because to me, there has been a very clear messaging from that athletic department about the basketball program as Hubert Davis goes into a make or break year. And if you remember, we talked about this earlier in the summer, right? After that roster gets put together, Luka Bogovic, the international player who just got to the States. If you remember, when Luka Bogovic signed, there was a report shortly thereafter that North Carolina spent $14 million. Now, this is in the pre-rev share era on its basketball roster. And it came from Inside Carolina, the best North Carolina outlet basically available. Okay, this wasn't some blog or some whatever. It wasn't said in passing. It was a report. And that report to me very much reflected that North Carolina wanted it known publicly, hey, we're letting the world know that we gave Hubert Davis every single thing that he needed to compete at the highest level. And if he can't do it this year, then he got to get the heck out and move out the way. And so to me, I think it's reassuring for Hubert Davis to know that, hey, man, if I just do what I'm supposed to do, I can stay at my alma mater and I'm going to have resources that are going to match pretty much anybody in college basketball, because 35% not great at math, but it's about $7 million. And frankly, it's about 50% more than most teams are going to pay in college basketball. So Hubert Davis, just, to quote Al Davis, just win, baby. You're going to be just fine. And if you win, you are going to have resources that are matched probably in the ACC only by Duke, maybe by Louisville, maybe by nobody. Maybe NC State would be in that mix. But for the most part, you're going to have resources to succeed. Where I think it's also interesting, I think that's Bubba Cunningham kind of putting out the bat signal to any future potential North Carolina basketball coach. Because if it does not go well, what Bubba Cunningham just basically said was as follows. He said, bottom line, end of story, guess what? Is that whoever you are out there, you are going to be given every single thing that is needed to compete at the highest level in college sports. So you need the biggest budget, we got the biggest budget. You need the biggest NIL, we got the biggest NIL. And I think that's interesting as we go into this rev share era of college sports, because listen, I forget if we've talked about it or not, but I think for most schools, it's going to be really hard to really compete at the highest level in everything. And I think schools are going to have to pick and choose, right? Kentucky, we talked about it. 45% is going to basketball. And even if that number is not right, it's going to be a higher percentage than most. Football, to a degree, is going to suffer. But the inverse of that is Georgia's probably going to get more than just about anybody. And you got to figure it out, Mike White, or you got to figure it out whoever. A school like Texas might prioritize football and men's baseball. UConn, I'm just using, and I don't have access to what UConn's doing, even though it's my alma mater. They might put more money into women's basketball, but I don't know that you can be great at everything in the rev share era. And so why this is important is because now you can go out to whatever candidates that are out there and basically say, whatever you need, whatever you might not be getting at your school, oh, baby, you can come here and get it, right? So like, imagine if you're Todd Golden. Todd Golden wins a national championship, but respectfully, Florida is always going to be a football first school. And I'm not saying it happened this summer, but maybe in a year from now, maybe in 3 years from now, maybe whenever that North Carolina job opens, Todd Golden doesn't feel like he has what he needs to succeed. Well, North Carolina is going to double my rev share pool and I have twice as much money to spend as I do at Florida, I got to probably consider taking that job. Nate Oates, Alabama. Listen, it's no secret. Alabama was not one of the biggest spenders in the SEC in basketball this offseason. It was Kentucky. It was probably Arkansas, maybe Auburn. It wasn't Alabama. And I don't think Alabama year over year is going to have what they need to succeed at the highest level. And so to me, Nate Oates, I thought he was either going to retire at Bama or go to the NBA. I never thought he'd coach at another place in college basketball. But if he just feels like, hey, Kalen DeBoer is getting everything and I'm getting table scraps and I can't compete with the top of this league, then I'm going to have to consider going elsewhere. And so to me, I know we're nerding out a little bit on this story. I think it's a pretty interesting story, and I think it speaks to North Carolina feeling like they have to feel very good about the state of their football team and at the very least the future of their basketball team as we enter this rev share era.